I'm Elizabeth Gearhart. I'm here with Brianne Cohen, who has a wonderful company for virtual wine tasting. Hi, Brianne.
Hey, Elizabeth, good morning.
Good morning. So it's past noon here. I could have some wine, right?
Yes, this is true. Yes. Is
So,
this really coffee in my glass? We'll never know.
so tell us, you're doing virtual wine tastings, but you've expanded it way out in 2021 from what it was in 2019 after we went through the horrific 2020. So let's hear what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a Los Angeles based event producer and wine educator. And so, yes, before the pandemic, before 2020, my life and my business looked very different. In pre-pandemic, or BC as I say, before Corona, the BC times, I was producing large scale events, mostly nonprofit. So I have a ton of nonprofit clients. I do a lot of work in the LGBT community. So I'm producing galas and fundraisers and capital campaign events, really big events. 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, right? That's what my life sort of looked like pre-pandemic. I also am a certified sommelier, and so I do offer wine education. I write about wine. I travel around the world and judge in international wine competitions. But that side of my business was much smaller because I had been producing events for almost 15 years now. So I had a really deep connection in that industry. And the wine education side started because I started studying wine for fun. I took sort of an evening course, and then I just kept moving up the rings of the ladder until it was not fun anymore. As I say, I spent way too much money, way too much money and way too much wine learning about this topic that I just loved. I just absolutely loved learning about the classic wine regions in the world. And so I did that, and I thought, gosh, I should really add this to my business. You know, they're complementary businesses, hospitality and wine and events and things. And so that's where the whole Brianne Cohen event production and wine education came to be. So I really had two arms of my business. 2019, I was doing tons of events, some wine education where I'm going into corporate spaces really and doing wine education as a team building activity. I love talking to regular everyday people about wine. Yes, it's always fun to be with my people, with my wine geeks and my wine nerds to talk shop, but there's nothing more than I love to be with a group of consumers, of people just that enjoy wine for fun, and to just be able to sort of elevate their knowledge of wine and help them, so as I say, drink better and up your wine game. Wherever you are in your wine journey, I'd love to be able to share something with you that you might learn. And so then 2020 hit, and as you can imagine, I am not doing the events anymore. So literally March 15th, I'm having to cancel every event that I have on the books for this coming year. You know, we were so naive in March. I kind of laugh. I had a big gala scheduled in San Francisco for mid-April of 2020. And when the pandemic hit, we pushed it to end of May. We're like, we'll be fine. You know, we'll just push it. You know, I think we all had those moments of, it's hindsight, right? We didn't
Right.
know. We didn't know what was happening. We thought, oh, we just need a few weeks to get things
Right. Right. 4 weeks and we're done, right? We
yeah,
always
we're
think
totally
4 weeks.
good. You know, and literally we're sending out things to the attendees and, oh, we'll see you in a month, you know, whatnot. That obviously didn't happen. So my business was decimated, like the entire industry. I mean, the entire event industry is just totally decimated. Everything was put on hold. I literally and figuratively had to take my event binders and put them, you know, in the closet. I had to, you know, get all of the information out of my head because you kind of obsess about it. You're like, when am I going to be able to do this event? When am I going to be able to make all this amazingness come to fruition? And so that has been put to the side. And I had this idea. I thought, I wonder if we can taste wine on Zoom. Everyone's talking about Zoom. I don't really know much about Zoom. I got a Zoom account. I coordinated a ticket. I went online and did an online ticketing. And I thought, I'm just going to do this free, fun online wine tasting. I'm going to get a bunch of people together on Zoom, and we're going to just talk wine, have a good time. Things are very stressful right now. The news was extremely stressful in March. So on March 19th, I had my first virtual wine tasting. And I put it out on my social media, which is not hundreds and thousands of people. It's, you know, a modest following. And I thought, you know, my mom and maybe a couple of friends would show up. I had 120 people on that Zoom call. And I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell these people? So we had a really fun Q&A, ask me anything, because most people don't get sort of individual time with a sommelier. You know, maybe you're at a restaurant, there's a sommelier, but it's a little intimidating. And this was just me going, hey guys, what questions do you have? Do you want to know about screw caps? Do you want to know how long a bottle of wine lasts once it's open? Let's just talk wine. We had a great time. I did that for 12 weeks straight. I just kept replicating it because there was a demand for it. Then I started getting inquiries for people to do private tastings, mostly corporate, because at that point we realized we were not going to get back together in a few weeks. And, people just said, hey, I want to get my employees together and do a fun wine tasting, but Zoom happy hours are getting a little stagnant. We need to jazz it up a bit. Just at nonprofits, our gala was canceled. How can we get our high value donors on a call to talk to them about our mission and what we're doing and how we need to pivot during the pandemic and how we need their support, i.e. money. So I was doing all of these corporate, private, and nonprofit virtual tastings. And then I found out that there were wineries that were doing these small format tasting sets, little baby bottles, little like 2 and 4 ounce bottles that could mimic that tasting room experience. When you go to wine country and you walk into a tasting room and they give you all the little pours, you get little pours of a bunch of different wines instead of having these full size bottles, because it's hard to wine taste with full size bottles at home if it's just you or one person. How many of these are you going to open at one time? So these small format sets that are about this size here are great because you get a beautiful little set sent to you. You have a guided tasting from a sommelier. We talk about the region, we talk about the winery. They're all boutique, family owned, small, beautiful wineries. And we drink some wine and talk about all the good stuff. So it's been a journey, but that's sort of what's happened. So my business used to be this full scale live event production business that is now, like I said, hibernating. We'll wake him up when the time comes. And for now, it's just all about virtual wine tasting.
Well, I love wine tastings. And one thing that my husband and I did right was in October 2019, we went to Napa and we tasted a bunch of wines. But the problem with Napa is that they can't serve food at these wineries, most of them. So you can't eat anything, like you can't even dull your tongue in between, unless I guess maybe you can bring it yourself and try to smuggle it up to your mouth. But so yours are a little better that way because you can actually do food pairings too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I work with, sometimes we'll have a chef on the call and people have the ingredients sent to their house and the chef is teaching them how to prepare the meal. And in between, I'm giving them wine tastings and pairing tips of what they're making. It's very, very fun.
Yeah, so you were saying when we were talking earlier that you started out with the wine tastings, pivoted to the wine tastings, and then expanded out. But now you're having to do new and different fun things for people because everybody that was doing wine is doing those kind of wine tastings now. So what are some of the different things you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, in the beginning, in March, April, May, the first few months of the pandemic, we were just happy clicking the Zoom link for whatever it is, something personal with your friends, an enrichment activity, artistic, wine tasting, whatever it is. You just could click Zoom, watch something, be entertained, and you were happy. Now we've all got the dreaded word Zoom fatigue, right? We've zoomed out as much as we can do. And so what I really focus on is that shared sensory experience. So like I said, with my tastings, everyone always has the same wines. I don't do any of the everyone source your own wines and we'll just come and talk, chat about wine when everyone's drinking something different. I'm trying my absolute best to replicate the experience we would have if we were together. If we were together, I would be leading you through a flight of wines. We'd all be tasting the same things. I'd be listening to what everyone is saying about the wines, what they like, what they don't like. We would do all of that. And so I try to do that as best as possible on Zoom. So it's key and important that we all have the wines together, and those little sets make it really easy. And then yes, now we are trying to jazz it up. We're trying to make things more interactive because the olden days, March of 2020, Zoom was very passive, right? If you weren't hosting, you were just sitting there listening, right? You were listening to someone talk about something and that was it. Now that's a little hard because our brains need more stimulation at this point. We're not getting all the stimulation from the outside world. We need to sort of jazz it up. And so what I do now is a few interactive experiences related to wine. So we're still doing virtual wine tasting, but I have a really fun class that's Be a Winemaker at Home, which is really cool. And so what we do, it's a blending workshop. So we will send component wines to your house. So you'll get little bottles of maybe 3 different red wines. Maybe it's a Cab, a Merlot, and let's say a Syrah. And then you get like a pipette and a beaker and an empty bottle. And I will actually will together on the Zoom, we will taste those wines individually, and I'll talk to you about what each of those wines would lend to a blend. I'll talk about how Cabernet Sauvignon lends tannins, about how Merlot gives like a beautiful velvety plum texture, you know, just all the different things that you would get from each individual wine. People taste it on their own, take their notes. And then we do the fun measurements. We literally do blending trials. I mean, you have to get your calculator out, count the milliliters, measure it out, and we taste different blends together until everyone can then come up with their own blend, their own signature blend. They figured out what they liked and they create it and put it in their empty bottle. So that's a really fun one that people really love. Also,
That really sounds fun. Hold on just a minute. So
yeah,
that really sounds fun. So I don't have to though have my own big group of people. Like I can sign up. And how many people would you normally have there? Because I'm like, I hate to say this, but some of my friends will not go on Zoom. They're like technically challenged or whatever. So I
yeah.
can't. I tried doing something early on, and I only had one set of friends that said they would do Zoom. So this can be all different people that you don't know, right? And you just sign up for your particular course, right?
Yeah, so I do private tastings all day long. So if you know corporate clients, nonprofits, individuals want to hire me, you just have to have a group of 10 people. That's my minimum, is 10 people for any of these experiences. Just the basic wine tasting, the blending, whatever it is. I also hold public monthly events. So once a month, you can join me, like you're saying. If you're like, I don't want to put a group together, but I just want to show up. I love wine. I'm at home. Once a month, you can hang out with me on Zoom. Let's see, last month we did a lovely tasting of Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays from a very small boutique producer. I had the winemaker on the call, so we all got to hang out with him and taste his wines. Next week, I'm doing a wine and chocolate tasting. So you're getting wine sent to you with these beautiful handcrafted chocolates, and we'll actually talk about how chocolates and wine play with each other and pair and whatnot. So once a month, you can do that, and all the information's on my website, briannecohen.com.
Great. So what else are you doing? So we talked about the blends, and then you just talked about the chocolates. Do you have any other fun things going on?
Yeah, so I also have an initiative. This is something that I started last year because everything started last year. This is a brand new business. I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, but I have this baby business that didn't exist before. But one thing that I try to focus on as well is diversity. That's a really big conversation in the wine industry, just like we're having in society, right? There's conversations about groups of people that have historically been underrepresented in certain industries. Wine is no exception. Wine has traditionally been, an upper class sort of elitist drink. It's just always been perceived that way. And I'm really trying to be one of the people that breaks that down, breaks the barriers down, and lets wine be something that is fun and approachable for you wherever you are in your wine journey. So diversity is key for me, and I'm trying to highlight specifically Black and BIPOC owned wineries. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. So essentially underrepresented groups in the wine industry. I want to focus on the wines that they're making that are amazing wines. So if you go to my website, you'll see a tab that says diversity. You can click on that and you can see all throughout the United States and the world, all of the Black owned wineries. There's about 50 of them or so. So maybe you're a wine club member. Maybe you're someone who has, I know there's a lot of winos out there, 5 or 7 wine clubs. Consider maybe swapping one out for one of these wineries if you want to support a minority-owned business. I also do virtual wine tastings featuring Black-owned wines. This month is Black History Month, so that's something that I'm doing with quite a few companies. Is all the attendees will have wine sent to their houses, and maybe 2 or 3 wines, and these are from 2 or 3 different Black-owned wineries. And we highlight and talk about their stories, taste their wines together. We have a great time.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know my husband and I have a cellar, and you and I were talking earlier, like you will answer any question. So I was telling you about a party we went to, and these people had this, I don't know, 20-year-old bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, and it was flat. And I was like, why did that happen? So you had some theories on that.
Yeah, I have some ideas about that. The key, you definitely need a quality wine in order to have ageability. When people talk about cellaring wine and laying down wine to age, we can't be talking about going to the grocery store and getting the $8, $10, or $12 bottle. Those wines are not built to age. There's certain structural elements that a wine needs to age. Those are things like tannins, flavor intensity, acid, sugar. There's just all these different layers and elements. And you're not going to get that with those cheapy wines at like the big box wine retailers or at the grocery store. So you have to start with a quality wine. And you said it was a high quality champagne. So why did it potentially go flat? My theory, one of my guesses is that maybe there were some storage issues, because you could have the best wine, and if it's not stored well, then you're going to have a problem. That wine might not last. And when I say stored well, really the key thing is that you don't want it to move a lot. I mean, you don't want to be doing Zumba with it in your backpack for days and days or anything. And you also want to keep the temperature consistent. You don't want to have any temperature fluctuation. So sometimes I've gone into people's homes and I've seen them go, oh, look at my, when you're a wine person, everyone wants to show you their wine, which is great. I love it. I love going into people's homes and I'm like, look at all my wine. And I had this gentleman show me his wine storage. He had a huge cabinet over his stove, in his kitchen, over his stove and oven. And he was showing me these beautiful bottles that I knew were all probably kaput, because we're talking about temperature fluctuations. That's a very hot area. The kitchen's hot, and not to mention right above the stove and oven. So you want to keep your wines in a cool, dark place, as I say. If you don't have a wine cellar, which most people don't, if you don't have a wine cellar, a wine fridge is a great option. Also your closet or underneath your bed. Those are the three key places.
So which wines do you think cellar the best?
Ooh, like I mentioned, there's these structural elements a wine has to have. So like, for instance, tannins really do help a wine age. So Cabernet Sauvignon is a very high tannin red wine. So Cab ages well historically. Not all Cab, like I said, if you're getting the $8 Cab at the grocery store, it ain't gonna age. You have to have a few other elements with it. Cabernets age very well. Also, yeah, vintage champagne. We just chatted about that. So champagne that has a date on the label, vintage champagne will age well. Also, if you go into the old world, if you go into Europe, you have some beautiful French wines that age well. So Burgundy and Bordeaux immediately come to mind, is very ageable. And Bordeaux, if you didn't know, is predominantly, if we're looking at a red Bordeaux, it's predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon. Not everyone knows that. You guys are wine lovers, so you probably knew that.
I didn't know that, but I knew that I love Bordeaux.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you like Cab, yeah. The two main red grapes in Bordeaux are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. So Bordeaux,
my favorites.
yeah, Burgundy. Also Italy, Northern Italian wines can age very well. So for example, Barolo, if you've ever had a Barolo, Barolos are built to last and built to age. Also, there's a few Southern Italian reds. There's the Barolo of the South, as we say, which is Aglianico, which is a red grape down there. So maybe a Taurasi would age as well.
Yes, I have a friend who loves that Barolo. So when it ages, what happens? Because I like a really deep flavor. My husband and I both, and we had a Burgundy last weekend, and it was almost like a Pinot Noir. It wasn't real rich and deep. So do they get deeper as they age, or smoother, or does it depend on the grape? What happens?
Yeah, a lot of different things can happen. And I will say, if you did have a Burgundy, that is Pinot Noir. Burgundy is. Yeah, Burgundy is Pinot Noir. In the old world in Europe, they don't label by grape. So you're never going to see the grape on the label. And that's what really is confusing for so many people, is that here in the US, you can go to the store, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Cab. You need to know, if you're in the old world, you need to know that Sancerre is Sauvignon Blanc, or the Burgundy is Chardonnay or Pinot, and what have you. So yeah, that's just a little tip as you go. But what happens when you age a wine? It actually varies. So as I say, until the bottle of wine is opened, it is a living, breathing thing. So from when the grapes are in the ground until the wine is being fermented, maybe it's aging in a barrel like these guys behind me. Maybe it's aging in bottle in the cellar in the winery. And then maybe it gets on a truck or a boat and goes to a store, goes to a restaurant. And until that cork is opened, things have been happening, okay? And then you could then age the wine 20 years yourself. Things are still happening. So I can't answer, oh, does it soften? Does it get deeper? Because since it's a living, breathing thing, it depends on where we are in that journey. So yes, historically, when you age wines, they can get a little bit more subtle, a little softer, the tannins, kind of chill out a bit. Lots of things sort of happen. But sometimes you actually can find a wine, maybe you're aging it, and sometimes there's this little, aging kind of does this usually, but sometimes you get this. There's a little moment where it just dips, and you might open a bottle and it's just, I'm saying flat, and I don't mean flat like there were bubbles, but I mean flat like it fell flat. And that it could be there is a point where sometimes wine hibernates, kind of goes to sleep a little bit, and that's not the right window to drink it. Unfortunately, you don't always know that until you open it and go, oh, this is not the moment. I needed to wait a little longer, or maybe I waited too long. So lots of different things happen. If you ever talk about people say, oh, I'm getting tertiary aromas and flavors of blank, blank, and blank. Tertiary, really, we're talking about aromas and flavors that develop over time. So that could be time in barrel if you're aging wine in barrel, or extended time in bottle. Those tend to be a little bit more savory flavors. So that's where you get more earthiness. You can get things like leather and tobacco and chocolate and coffee bean. Whereas primary aromas and flavors, you might hear people talk about those, are usually fruit and floral notes. The very youthful, when you think about youthful wines, are just rooty tooty, fresh and fruity, as I say. Those are young primary youthful wines. Over time, they get more tertiary, and it is those more savory, like I said, leather, tobacco, all those, deeper things.
So then what happens after you take the cork out? How long can you leave it, and where should you leave it? Like if I
Yeah.
have a cab and I take the cork out, and we had one of those pressurizer things for a while, but we didn't really like it. And I drink a couple glasses, so it's half full. I put the cork back in. Now what do I do with it, and how long can I wait?
Yeah. So once, like I mentioned, the wine is continually evolving and changing until you open the cork. Once you take the cork out of a wine, it is going to start deteriorating. So it will generally, not always, generally never be better than that moment you opened it. Some wines, like a Barolo, for example, might need to be in a decanter for 6 or 8 hours, and then it's going to vastly improve. But as a general rule, you open that wine and it is fresh and it is ready to go. So I will say, as a general rule, wine is, once you open it, 2 to 3 days is when it's going to be freshest. And I always go back to quality, right? Like I say, it really depends. Are we talking about the grocery store glug? Are we talking about, an $80 Napa cab? They're two different things. The grocery store glug is going to deteriorate immediately. The next day is going to taste not great. What happens usually is the fruit peters out. That's generally what happens for any wine. You open a wine, you're getting all these fruit flavored, aromas and flavors, and then it's going to just start deteriorating slowly, 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 or quickly if it's a cheap wine. So 2 to 3 days is key. And I will say we should be borrowing from what restaurants and bars are doing, right? Not right now in pandemic, but restaurants and bars have to open a bunch of different wines. They have all their buy their glass programs, right? We should follow what they do. And this is how they store their wines. And so I used to work in a wine bar, and I follow that. And I know many people that work at bars and restaurants and do this as well. You open your wine, like you said, you have a couple glasses and you put the cork back in. What do you do with it? Number one, you store the wine in the fridge. I don't care what color it is. Red, white, bubbly, rosé, anything. Store it in the fridge. That is key. At restaurants, they literally take everything that's open, goes in the walk-in refrigerator. That's going to help keep the wine that might give you an extra day or two. Remember, I talked about 2 to 3 days is key. So that's going to be your primary thing. Yes, there's a few different tools. I didn't bring them handy or anything, but I like to spray. It's called Private Preserve. It's an argon gas that you spray in the wine. $10 on Amazon. And what that does is that puts a blanket of inert gas, which is argon based, on the layer of wine wherever it is. If it's halfway down, if it's close to the top, close to the bottom, that inert gas prevents oxygen from permeating into the wine. Because when I mentioned that the wine starts deteriorating the second you take the cork out, it's because oxygen has been exposed to the wine. So you're trying to prevent oxygen getting to your wine. So that little spray helps. Putting it in the fridge helps. That's pretty much all you need to do.
Perfect. Well, I feel like I've learned a lot just in this short little conversation.
So glad.
Yeah, I didn't know about that whole dip in the aging process. That could explain something, because we got some wine from a really good winery and it just didn't taste very good. And we were surprised. And I think we're at the wrong spot. Maybe we're in the bottom of the dip.
That's part of the game of aging, especially if you and I know you and Richard, like enjoy wine and like to age it, is, sometimes people buy a case of wine and then you want to kind of enjoy it over time. You might find a window where, God, that bottle didn't taste so great. And then if you're still working through your case over the years, then it comes back to life. And it's quite lovely when that happens.
Well, that explains a lot, quite honestly. So thank you. So how do people find you to get your kits or to get into your wine tastings?
Of course. So my website is briannecohen.com, BrianneCohen.com. And you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Clubhouse. I don't know if anyone's on that new platform I just joined. My handle there at all of those places is Sommspirations, SOMMSPIRATIONS. And that's just a play on the phrase wine inspirations from a sommelier. Sommspirations.
Great. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much, Brianne. This has been so enlightening.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. It was a pleasure.